Hi, my name's Dr. Adam Booth and welcome to another locked down edition of Quantum Source. Now today on Quantum Source we're talking about the psychology of telling the truth, or on the other hand, the psychology of lying. This has a relevance to lockdown life, of course, because at the start of this period we were given guidance on staying at home, restricting your outside travel, all in the name of protecting the NHS and trying to stop the spread of the coronavirus. Now, that's all great, but obviously it only works if we can believe that everyone really is all in it together, that people aren't travelling unnecessary distances across the country, and that when they say that they did this for defensible reasons, we can really believe that they did them for defensible reasons. Can we really put faith in what those people are saying? And how good are we at actually recognising that they may or may not be telling the truth? So today's speaker is Dr. Chris Street. He's an expert in the psychology of lying. He's in the Department of Psychology at the University of Huddersfield, and in just a few moments we're going to be giving him a bell. But as with all quantum sources, the recommendation is that fascinating facts are best served with something refreshing. But today, in the name of straight up telling the truth, I'm going healthy, and I'm going to be enjoying just a plain old glass of water, just to keep things healthy, you know. So yeah, in the name of the truth, you get yourself a nice glass of water, and we'll give Chris a call. Cheers. And hello, Chris. Good afternoon. How are you doing?
Hey, Dan, you right? Yeah, not bad. Thanks. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm all right, truth be told. And in fact, the truth and lies is the subject of today's particular discussion, right? I don't want to sort of give everybody the impression that you're interested in lying, because that obviously paints you in a pretty bad light.
Yeah.
But you're interested in the psychology of lying, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. How do we decide if someone's lying to us or not?
Okay.
Pretty tough decision.
Yeah, absolutely. And one that's kind of relevant within the lockdown and needing to trust that everybody is actually kind of obeying government guidance, and that we are indeed all in it together, and there isn't people who are travelling hundreds of miles up the country to you know, hypothetically flout guidelines. But hey, who am I to say?
I can't imagine who you're speaking about.
No, absolutely. It's purely hypothetical. However, let's talk in physical terms and also honest terms. First of all, recommend me a source for lockdown.
Alrighty. Well, I don't know if you can tell from my accent. I'm actually I'm Welsh originally, although I'm based in Yorkshire now, in Huddersfield.
Right.
And here is my source. I have quite a sweet tooth. So this is a source called Merlin. It's worth checking out if you're a Bailey's fan, or if you're an Irish cream fan. This is a Welsh cream liquor. Absolutely magnificent. Must get it.
That's from the Penderyn distillery, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
It's like Penderyn's version of Bailey's or something.
Yeah, they have the whole range. You know, they have gins and vodkas.
Oh, right.
They really go quite wide, but they like to think of themselves as kind of the Welsh gold version of alcohol. That's right. And hence their logo, which is this kind of gold seam down the side here.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Killer stuff. Right. And I must admit, I have a bottle, but this is empty. It's entirely empty now.
Right. So this is a source that you have enjoyed during lockdown, and not that you still can enjoy. All right. Cool.
Yeah, I bought it recently, and it went quite quickly.
Right. Nice one. Okay. So let's talk about truth and lies then. If we could get you to share your screen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
All right. So I think I'll begin with a little story, if that's all right.
You go for it.
Man here is Stanley Mark Rifkin. And in 1978, he committed the largest bank heist to that date. And he did it without raising a weapon, without terrorizing a single person. In fact, he just asked for the money and he got it. Now, this story is a little unusual, but we'll see actually a little bit later that this is not an isolated incident.
Right.
So Stanley worked at the Security Pacific National Bank in 1978. And he was charged with maintaining the computer servers there. Now, he learned a little bit about the banking industry. Turns out that when I pay you, the money doesn't come from my bank account immediately into your bank account. The way it works is the banks keep track of which bank they need to give money to, which bank they're needing money taken from. And then at the end of the day, all the banks get together and organize those payments. But it happens through something called a wire room that sits in the middle that orchestrates all those payments to each other. So as you can imagine, a lot of money being passed through every day. And what do we do when we want to put security on something? We give it a password, right? And you may have some point in your life been in a situation where an institution or maybe an email provider has asked you to update your password frequently, maybe every 3 months. Turns out this is a pretty bad idea, but you can see the idea behind it, which is that they don't want people to get the password, maybe because you wrote it down somewhere accidentally or told someone of it. And so updating it is supposed to protect against that. And the reason it's a pretty bad idea is because, well, first off, this password was very complex. They didn't want people guessing it. Lots of money, of course, right? Nobody wants this to be a simple password to guess. But also this password changed daily. And so the reason this is a bit of a problem is because people just couldn't remember it. It changed so often that people couldn't remember the password. And what they ended up doing instead was writing that down on a Post-it note and attaching it to the bottom of their monitor. And Stanley got wind of that and decided he was going to one day just remember the password. And he went into the bank's own lobby, picked up a payphone there. Remember, 1978, right? Picked up a payphone, phoned the wire room, pretending to be someone who has the authority to make a payment from the bank, and started giving some of the details. I guess a bit cliche now, but it was a Swiss bank account. And so the story goes that at one point he got challenged by the wire room, and he said, "Yep, sure, I'll just go check those details for you." Hangs up, picks up the phone again, and now phones the bank, this time pretend to be from the wire room. So he's switching roles. And now he's saying to the bank, well, we have certain details that we need to check with you to make sure that you're up to date. And through doing that, he was able to get more details. And so in this kind of back and forth exchange, he eventually got all the details he needed to make his $10.2 million transfer to that Swiss account, which he never got caught for, by the way. He got caught 2 years later, selling diamonds on the black market for a different crime. So this crime is quite unusual because effectively what's happened here is that people simply believed that Rifkin had access, that he was the person he claimed to be. And he didn't really get challenged at any point. And as I say, this is not an isolated incident. Back about 5 years ago or so 2015, it was reported by 30 banks collectively and anonymously that they lost somewhere in the region of $3.1 billion through the same techniques. It's very much an ongoing issue that results from simple issue of trust. Now, this isn't simply an economic issue, that is trust and deception. It actually affects us societally as well. And here are just a whole range of different situations where deception touches on our lives in some way. Some of us might remember the famous case of baby P there in Haringey, the child abuse and neglect case. It affects military decisions and how they interact with their enemies and their information gathering techniques. And then daily we have to deal with emails. And when we get emails, we have to make decisions as to whether they're genuine or not. So it does affect most people in some way or another. So what do we know about deception and how do we decide who's lying and who's not? Well, it turns out that when we look for behaviors that differentiate liars and truth tellers to see, does a liar look different to a truth teller? It seems like they just don't seem to be different at all. So what we're looking at here on this chart is when we look for a particular behavior, let's say eye contact, right? We could potentially find the truth tellers show that behavior more often than liars. Can you see my mouse there?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So yes, so truth tellers may show that behavior more often than liars. Or maybe liars show that behavior more often than truth tellers. Or maybe there's no difference at all. Maybe there's no difference between liars and truth tellers. And what we can see here is many, many behaviors, or is it about 69 behaviors in this particular study, showed absolutely no difference between liars and truth tellers.
And so those are behaviors like you say, like making eye contact or breaking into a sweat or fiddling around with something or something like that.
Yeah, it's a really varied list as it goes. It's the visual behaviors, but it's also the verbal behaviors as well, pitch and things like this.
Okay.
So yeah, all these behaviors that we could observe passively with the expectation that somehow these people are going to be leaking cues to their deception.
Yeah.
And it turns out they just don't seem to be. They don't seem to be doing that. Now, you can see, of course, there are some behaviors that look like maybe they do differentiate. And so at that point, we need to start asking, well, how well do they differentiate?
Yeah.
And it turns out that these differences are very small. And the best way to explain this, I've kind of borrowed a phrase from a famous statistician in the 80s who said effect sizes like this, differences between liars and truth tellers, is the equivalent of trying to determine if someone is 15 years old or 16 years old based on their height alone.
Right.
So if I told you I know someone called Bob and they're 5'8", are they 15 or are they 16?
Yeah.
I mean,
it's really not very reliable, right?
Yeah, it seems incredibly difficult to know.
Yeah.
And yet, in general, we would probably agree that 16-year-olds are probably slightly taller than 15-year-olds in general.
Yeah.
Even though, of course, some 15-year-olds will be much taller than some 16-year-olds. So it's the equivalent of trying to make that decision. The differences are probably there in general, but they're so small and unreliable, it's very difficult to make a decision on them.
Yeah.
And in fact, recently it's been argued, last year there was a publication, that these behaviors here that look like they might separate actually are the result of poor research practices, and that these behaviors don't actually exist at all.
Right,
and that actually everything is on zero. So it's looking pretty bad.
Yeah.
It looks like we don't stand a chance. Now, sorry, were you going to ask something at that point?
No, you go for it.
Okay, so one thing I do want to point out here is this little reference I've got here, Di Paolo et al. In 2003. And it's a little bit of a sidestep, my apologies, but I think it's important to talk about this. So that there, if you've seen some of these quantum sources before, I'm sure you have seen these already, and someone may even have explained them to you. This is a reference to some published research. So this is actually the paper here. If you were to search this, you'd find this paper, and you'd even be able to read this little summary at the front. And the reason I tell you this is because if you were to run an internet search right now to find, say, cues to deception, or how do I spot a liar, you'll find many web pages, videos, even books telling you this is how you spot a liar. Unfortunately, much of that is not backed by research. It's people's own opinions. And so in this field, I think it's incredibly important, more than many other fields, to recognize that if you do read something about deception or lie detection, that is followed with something like this, a citation to actual evidence that you can then go and check. I think that's really important to realize.
Yeah, I think that it's really worth flagging that up, because it's something that we probably encounter on a day-to-day basis. Like you say, we've all received the emails that we have to make the call about. Are they trying to scam me? Are they trying to phish me bank details? And so everyone has their own opinions on how good they are at spotting lies and kind of old wives' tales. So the quantum source definitely endorses peer-reviewed science.
So this is what we know about deception. Right? The people seem to be very good at it. They look just like truth tellers. So when you passively observe them, they're able to mimic what a truth teller looks like. So it might not be too surprising then to learn that when we think about lie detection, it turns out we're pretty bad at it. You suck, I suck, we all suck. Right? We're pretty bad at lie detection. Accuracy is a round coin flip. And training doesn't really seem to help that. Neither does confidence, age, profession. Being a lie detector researcher doesn't help. In fact, nothing, as far as we know, really does seem to help. There don't seem to be any indicators where some individuals might be better than others. We all seem to be equally pretty bad. And to make matters worse, we tend to believe other people are telling the truth. So if I give you a statement, like, say, maybe I claim in January I went to the top of the Eiffel Tower, took a selfie, and drank champagne or something, people tend to guess that you're telling the truth rather than lying. And we call that a truth bias.
Okay. So
these are two findings we are really confident about in lie detection. One is that we're really bad at it, and the other is that we tend to believe other people are telling the truth rather than think maybe they're lying. And so given those findings, over the past 60 years, the story has been, well, we're pretty inaccurate, we're doing the wrong things, we seem to be gullible, naive, taking at face value whatever people tell us. Pretty negative story. So is it that hopeless? Is there any hope for us at all? What I want to argue is actually that yes, there is. And in fact, what we're doing is pretty sensible. So the first question we want to ask, if we want to see that there's any hope for us at all, is a really simple question. In the most simple situation, could we spot a lie? If there was something like Pinocchio's nose, could we spot that? And could we use it to make the right decision? Remembering just a second ago, we said that people seem not to benefit from training, that they seem to be highly inaccurate and seem to believe other people telling the truth. So while this might seem like a silly question, it's an important one. It's a first step to understanding whether people can decide whether others are lying or telling the truth. And it turns out that, yes, they do seem to be able to. So only recently has research started to do this, but we've started presenting people with really good cues to deception. And in one study by Bond and colleagues in 2013, they asked people like yourself to come into the lab and then give them two options. If you tell me the truth, Adam, you get to leave early. But if you lie, you have to watch the clock for 10 minutes, then you get to leave.
Right.
Guess what? Nobody wants to sit around waiting for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So everyone takes the motivation to leave early. And we tell a whole bunch of other people the exact opposite. So if you lie, you get to leave early. And if you tell the truth, you have to wait. And so those people will lie. And the other people who are motivated to leave early to tell the truth will tell the truth. And so you end up with these videos where people are lying and telling the truth because they've been motivated to leave early to do that.
Yeah.
Absolutely everyone in that study takes that motivation, 100% of people.
Right.
Now, if you take those recordings of people who are lying and telling the truth, show them to a new bunch of people, they do awful, as usual. They hit low accuracy rates. But if you then explain this person was motivated such that if they told the truth, they could leave early, and if they lie, they couldn't, they hit near perfect accuracy rates.
Wow.
98% accuracy rates.
Wow.
In a field where we said that basically training doesn't seem to help boost you above chance accuracy, profession doesn't seem to help confidence, age, and so on. But at least we can, given a really good cue, we can make good decisions.
Yeah, okay.
And it turns out that while people often report things like eye contact as maybe being a cue to deception, this isn't, as we've already discussed, this isn't a good cue to deception at all. While people say that they think they are good cues, when you look at the judgments they actually make, they don't use eye contact. They ignore it. And they rely on things like, well, does that statement match with something physical about the world that I know about the world? Is there an inconsistency in the statement? And these are slightly more reliable bits of information to use if you're going to try to make that decision. So it seems like actually people might be doing some of the right things. But maybe this is over-optimistic because this is an ideal situation, right? We don't have these perfect cues available to us. As we've already talked about, there aren't good cues available usually. Liars can look just like truth tellers. In fact, they report trying to do that. They present behaviors that try to look honest, as you'd imagine. So it's a lot of decisional uncertainty. I mean, it's equivalent of if I have a pen top and I did, say, shake it in my hand, there we go. Which hand is it in? That's a difficult decision, right? How are you supposed to decide which hand it's in? You have effectively no information here. And it's very similar for lie detectors. They have no good information. So how do they make any kind of decision at all? So I'd like to do a little demonstration with you, Adam, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
So I got a piece of paper here. What I ask you to do is just go ahead and close your eyes for me. If you do that now,
Okay.
if you do the same at home as well. And if you open your eyes again,
Yeah.
what I'd like you to do for me is just try to act out or mime what you think happened while your eyes were closed. I know it's a little bit silly, but give it a go for me.
So you had the paper and I heard the sound, which implies to me that you tore it.
Yeah, totally reasonable, right? And I imagine everyone else at home is doing the same thing, probably doing this.
Yeah.
Why did you guess that?
Because I heard the sound of paper tearing. You'd got a complete sheet of paper up at the start. When I opened my eyes again, there it was, two separate pieces of paper. So the tear sound makes me think that you must have torn it in two.
Absolutely, yeah, totally reasonable. I'm sure everyone else at home is thinking exactly the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So you have limited visual information, and I'm asking you to do this visual task. And this is very similar to a lie detector. They have to make a decision as to whether someone's lying or telling the truth, but they don't have good information. Just like you were doing that visual task, you didn't have good information.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, you tried to use what information you had available to you to try to make the best decision you could. Now, one option was, as you say, maybe I just did this. Another option is that I got someone stood here next to me and we ripped it together.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Maybe I stood on it and ripped it. What I actually did was that, except I did it a little bit better. So there are all sorts of ways I could have done it. Why didn't you guess those?
I guess that the hand tear is the the simplest option. And what I saw before I closed my eyes was your hands up in front of the screen, and then they're back there again immediately after.
Absolutely, yeah. So we're trying to use as much as possible the information we have available to us. And many people in this situation will report that, well, when I see people rip paper in the world, they don't do this. They don't stand on it. They don't grab other people to do it with them.
Yeah.
They do this. This is the obvious solution. And so your experience tells you this is what people do. Okay.
It's just like the simplest solution out there. Like, so there isn't anyone stood next to you. There's no evidence of, like, you've not got a paper cut on your lip or something like that. So it's just the simple solution.
Yeah.
Cool.
Right. So in that demonstration there, you're trying as much as possible to use your experience and understanding of the world to make a decision. And this is what the adaptive lie detector theory is arguing, or allied theory for short. What it says that when we've got good cues about this specific statement, we try to use those. So for instance, my story about being on top of the Eiffel Tower, if I had a selfie, if I showed you that selfie, which was time-stamped, date-stamped, that'd be a really great piece of information about that specific statement. You could also use, say, my body language while I was telling the statement, or whether I appear nervous. But these aren't reliable. These are not good bits of information, even though they relate to that statement. So this theory is arguing that when you've got good pieces of information, reliable bits of information that relate to that statement, you'll use them and you can make a good judgment. Just like we saw with the motivated liars and truth tellers who could leave early. People hit near perfect accuracy rates. But when we don't have those things available to us, which is often the case, what do? Well, the adaptive lie detector theory argues that we try to rely on our knowledge about statements in general, trying to use our past experience of the world to understand what usually happens in this situation. How do people usually behave? And in much the same way with the paper rip, we're trying to understand how do people usually rip paper, given what I know about this situation.
Yeah.
What happens in lie detection then? What is that information that we try to rely on? Well, it turns out that people tend to tell the truth more often than not. So what we're looking at here is the data from a study by Halevi and others in 2013, but it's been replicated a few times. And on the bottom here, this is the number of lies that were told by people in a diary study. So they had to take a diary with them for 24 hours and record the lies that they told. And this is the number of lies they told over that period. So most people, as you can see, are telling 0 lies. In fact, there's 41% of people, and that's what this y-axis is representing, the percentage of people in this study who reported that many lies. And there are a small group of people, very few people, who are telling 17 lies in a 24-hour period. Quite a lot.
Yeah.
And in fact, the research suggests that actually 5% of people, a really small group of people, are telling 50% of the lies. Half of the lies ever being told are being told by a very small group of people. And, I'm sure we all know someone like that, right?
Yeah.
It's never us. It's never us, of course.
Is the, someone's, their one lie a day is the completion of the diary or something like that? They're actually much more flagrant liars than that.
So it could be. They did. So at least in these studies, they do make quite an effort to define exactly what they mean by a lie.
Right, okay.
And so they exclude many different options. So they are quite specific what they mean by a lie in these studies. But what you can see here is that while people are, 41% of people are not lying at all, this still means 60% of people are lying, which seems like a lot still. But remember, they're not telling that many lies. And in their daily interactions, they actually have far many more truthful interactions that they engage in. People tend to tell the truth. And whether that's you going out to the shops, whether you're buying a ticket on a bus, going to the cinema, buying something there, who knows what. Even if it's just a conversation in your house, we tend to tell the truth far more often than we lie. And it turns out that we don't particularly like people lying to us. We actively discourage it in people. By the way, if you're punishing your children for lying, this is not a good strategy. It turns out they don't stop lying, they get better at hiding it. So that's not the way to go. You might be better off trying to teach them to tell the truth and reward them for that.
Okay.
Or, punishing lying doesn't help.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there are all sorts of reasons why we think people should tell the truth. And in fact, for language to function, for language to work, it has to be truthful more often than not. So if I want to communicate a thought from my head into your head, we do it through language. That's the purpose of language. And if I was to use words that don't represent what's in my head, then language becomes totally meaningless.
Yeah.
It doesn't allow me to communicate what I need to communicate to you.
Mm.
And so for language to work, it actually has to be truthful more often than not.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it just becomes nonsense and it means nothing. So there are all sorts of reasons to believe people will generally tend to tell the truth in a given situation. And so on the basis of that, we can kind of explain some of these past findings that we've been talking about in a more adaptive, in a more functional way. So rather than seeing the low accuracy as being an indicator of an inability or that the training is somehow evidence that we aren't very good at detecting lies, instead really it's just an indication that there aren't good bits of information out there. There's just no good evidence. There's nothing that's telling us that this person is lying. So of course accuracy is going to be very low, and training probably won't help, because train as much as you want, if the information isn't there, you can't use it. And the second finding that I said is one of these findings we're fairly confident about, that seems to imply that we're really gullible and naive. Actually, it doesn't need to be evidence of naivety or gullibility. Actually, this might just be that we're trying to make the best guess in the absence of those good cues that we need. And what's a good guess? Well, most people tend to tell the truth. And in the absence of better information, why wouldn't you guess truth?
Yeah.
So we're seeing these behaviors not as evidence of an error or a naivety, but rather actually evidence of something quite adaptive and functional. And that makes sense given the information available to them. So I'm not going to talk too much about the evidence surrounding that theory, just because I want to try and keep this to time. And I think you're probably more interested in what the implications may be from that theory. So there are a few different practical implications for us. One of which I would say is that, well, we know that when liars and truth tellers are free to behave however they wish, they don't look different from each other. They seem to look the same. And Allied is arguing that when we actually have these good indicators that do separate them, then we can actually make good judgments. So what we need to do is start actively eliciting cues from people, creating ways that differentiate liars and truth tellers. And this is going to be important because liars will try to appear truthful as well. They will present cues that look honest. And so it's not enough for us to simply try to passively observe their behaviors, because their behaviors will look honest. They will look genuine. And there's no evidence to the idea that somehow they will unconsciously leak from them, that somehow they will give away these behaviors. There's no evidence for this. They're very good at hiding the truth and presenting a lie. So that's one implication. And in fact, this is where some of the research is starting to go now, trying to develop ways of actively eliciting information that separates truth tellers and liars.
So this would be kind of like inconsistencies in a story. You know, you keep actively probing at it and see if you can break the web of lies or something like that.
In a sense, yes, although interestingly, probing can backfire. Because if you probe people and they seem to stand up to the scrutiny, it gives the appearance of honesty. And
kind of galvanizes more likely to believe it. Yeah, okay.
So that can be a bit of a problem. But the mechanisms people are trying to use now are things like using documented evidence, as we talked about before. So whether that's signing into a book or taking a selfie, anything that's physically checkable in the world that would then contradict or match the story. That's kind of the direction we're starting to see now. The second implication of the adaptive lie detector theory is that we tend to believe other people, not because it's an error, but rather because it's a good guess. And so if we want to reduce things like, for instance, phishing, if we want to reduce our susceptibility to phishing scams, we need to encourage some level of skepticism, because people seem to be making this guess on the basis of their past knowledge in the absence of information about this particular statement. And doing that is potentially something people aren't aware of. Now, we don't know that yet. We don't know what the evidence is here, whether people do recognize that they're making that good guess or not. The research is really early at this point, so we don't know. But it might be that they're making those kind of guesses and not even realizing it. So we want to engage, and part of actually what I'm doing in my research, working with a national cyber security firm, is to try to create mechanisms that encourage a level of skepticism, that get people to think this email could be fraudulent, or this text message could be fraudulent, or this person selling something at my door may have a second motive. And so it's all about that what if. that what if question. What if this person isn't genuine? And just thinking about that. Now, that has to be tempered to some degree. You can't simply disbelieve everything. Your life will come to a standstill.
Yeah, you're not encouraging people just to become all out cynical about everything.
No, it won't function. And in fact, it can't function. You would end up becoming a hermit. You would interact with nothing, right? Yeah. So we all have to make our decisions as to what level of risk we want to engage with. And so it's about just keeping in mind the possibility of deception and then exploring whether there are possible reasons for thinking there really is deception here. So are there indicators, are there pieces of physical evidence that might suggest that actually this isn't genuine? So it's a skepticism, but it's a healthy one, a respectful one, and a polite one, really. We're not saying, accuse you're lying. We're not saying be accusatorial. We're saying just maintain an openness to the possibility that what you're hearing isn't true. So we've talked about the importance of this topic. It does touch, I think, upon many of our lives, whether we realize it or not. And that does come in the form of phishing emails, I think, for the most part. That's probably where most of us can identify with it. But it certainly impacts upon law and order, and also on the more macro scale of global politics and defense of the realm and so on. And what we're seeing in this research is that people are inaccurate, they're not very good at detecting lies, and they tend to believe other people are telling the truth. But that isn't necessarily an error. In fact, what we're arguing is that it isn't an error. It's a sign that people are trying to make the best decisions they can with the limited information they have available to them. And so if we want to improve that decision making, we need to either elicit cues to deception or try to find ways of encouraging the skepticism. And that's part of what we're trying to do in our work here at Huddersfield. So just very quickly, I'm going to throw these up on the screen. As I said, these are the pieces of evidence we're relying on. So you can just hit pause and check those out if you want. But that's me.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, Chris. If I could get you to unshare the screen.
Sure thing. See if I can do this smoothly, shall we? Not smooth enough, clearly. Okay.
Cool. Well, thanks very much. That was some really fascinating insights. Could I just ask a couple of questions then? I don't know whether this is simply like turning the argument on its head, whether it just is the flip side, or whether it's actually much more complicated in its own right. But let's say that someone is actually trying to tell the truth. They might be trying to tell an implausible truth, but it is nonetheless the truth. How good are we at kind of actually gauging that?
Well, here's the thing. When I was talking about the chance accuracy, that's an accuracy overall, right? Ignoring the fact that you could be detecting a lie or detecting the truth. When we separate between those, what we find is that people seem to be at chance accuracy for detecting lies, but slightly above chance accuracy for detecting truths. Now, it's important to recognize, though, also that people tend to believe other people are telling the truth. So what does that mean? Well, if you guessed that every statement I made was the truth, right? If you took it to the extreme and just said, always telling the truth, you'd get every truth right and every lie wrong. And so even though it kind of looks like we're above chance accuracy for detecting truths, that isn't actually what's going on. It's not that we're able to pick up on truthful cues. It's that we just tend to say truth more often. And so when they do actually are telling the truth, we get those ones right, just by chance. So we don't know if there's, just let me have a think about that for a second. Yeah, I can't think of any situation where I've seen evidence that people are able to detect truthful cues.
Right, okay.
But this is part of the direction in which people are starting to take their research now.
Yeah.
So I mentioned there about looking for checkable details. There's something called the verifiability approach, which is something you could actually use at home, to be fair. It suggests that you tell the interviewee or whoever it is you're speaking to, although it is quite accusatorial, so there is that, that the more checkable details you give me, the more I'm willing to believe you.
Yeah.
And so this has two benefits. The first is that truth tellers recognize what they need to include. They will include more checkable details if they're told that. So they actually do need to be told that because they're not sure exactly what it is they need to do. Truth tellers tend to believe the truth will just come out.
Okay.
They don't think they need to present an argument. They think they'll just present it however is the truth, and that will just be accepted. Lie tellers will, of course, manipulate their stories to be truthful. And as a result, they can actually appear more plausible sometimes.
Yeah.
So it has that benefit. And the second benefit is that liars will try to incorporate those checkable details, but they're in a catch-22. They can't, because as soon as they start doing that, I could go out and check them.
Yeah.
And I'll show them to be wrong.
Yeah.
So it kind of creates this opportunity for actively eliciting different behaviors. Truth tellers will produce more of them. Lie tellers will have to produce fewer of them. Even though they'll try to include them because they know that's what they need to do, they can't produce as many as a truth teller could.
Yeah, yeah. And without falling over themselves. And this is, I guess, this kind of like, methinks he doth protest too much kind of thing, where, you know, they're trying so hard, but eventually it's the seeds of their own destruction. I mean, I was kind of thinking that, you know, if you do something that's, you know, might be true, but it's just not usual behavior that people can't ground, you know, that you might test your eyes by taking a drive or something like that. But, you know, it's hardly surprising then that people don't believe you when they've, you know, who's heard of someone doing that?
Right, agreed, right? And so the adaptive lie detector's perspective on something like this would be that, well, I don't have direct physical evidence myself. I don't, but we know that he did it, as far as we're concerned, because there are evidence, there are eyewitness piece of evidence, and he's never denied it. Yeah. That's not to say that all confessions are true, by the way. Many are false. That's important to bear in mind. But yeah, it doesn't seem to be any question as to whether he actually did it. So there's that. So then the question becomes one of intent. And there, I guess we have to rely on our own past experience, right? We don't have physical evidence about his intent. And so there we start relying on our knowledge about the situation to try to fill in that gap. And who puts their child in a car and drives 60 miles or however far it was to check their eyesight?
However far
it. So then I think we make our own judgments. Whether those judgments are right or wrong is hard to say.
Yeah.
They are judgments that we make on the basis of reasonable inferences.
Yeah.
And they could be wrong, just like your paper rip judgment was wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're still reasonable.
Yeah. Yeah. And in the end, the fact of the matter is that the paper got ripped.
Yes, right.
So, right. Yeah. Okay, well, Chris, we'll leave it to your afternoon and for your dreams of further pen-daring products. But I would just say thanks very much again. If anyone out there in internet land has any questions for Chris, then post them on the Quantum Source Twitter account. Chris is on Twitter as well, so he can see your questions, and I'm sure he'd be happy to get back to you.
Totally. All right, thanks, Adam.
Yeah, all right, and thanks very much, and we'll see you around.
Okay, so maybe it seems that most of the time we give people the benefit of the doubt, and maybe we should be giving people the benefit of the doubt because they're usually telling the truth. But do approach that with a healthy degree of scepticism and you won't be played for a mug. Thanks very much to Chris then, and thanks very much to you as the audience. If you enjoyed that, we will be posting more lockdown podcasts to keep you educated and entertained. Here's the police out to find liars. We will be posting more podcasts to keep you educated and entertained. Just keep your eyes on the Quantum Source Twitter and Instagram feeds. Just remains for me to say that this has been Quantum Source. I've been Dr. Adam Booth. I promise you, I'm honest, you've been great. Cheers, stay well, stay skeptical.